Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the show. Our topic today, immigration reform, and how the major changes that are being proposed by the president and being debated by Congress could impact everyone. You have lots of questions about this, and we're going to get to those in just a few moments. Our guest is Professor Isabel Medina from Loyola Law School. She's here to answer them. And by the way, many thanks to those of you who've been sending in your questions through Facebook, through Twitter, and through email. We love having you participate in the program. So going into break there, we saw the comment from Senator Mary Landrieu, who says that she believes that this is a good place to start, this framework that has been put together by the bipartisan committee. Prior to that, we heard from Senator Vitter, who said that, he feels that this is very much like what was proposed in 1986. He calls it a recipe for failure. Is he right about this? Is it similar to what was proposed then?
It isn't really. First of all, we don't have the details yet as to who exactly is going to be provided this pathway to legalization. The other thing is that the context is very, very different. We're talking now about comprehensive immigration reform, not just looking at employers and enacting an employer-sanctioned provision that is not going to get enforced. We're looking at the problem comprehensively, looking at the fact that our legal immigration system doesn't provide enough visas for work-related. That is going to change. The other thing that has changed is we really have been enforcing the prohibition against employment of undocumented immigrants. The will to do that wasn't there in the decade after 1986. I think it's there now. The other thing that's different is in 1986, we did not have in place an employment verification system. That is a way for employers to verify whether someone had authority to work. And we are it took us almost 20 years, but we do have an employment verification system in place now. It's not perfect. It needs to get better, but we are a lot closer to having that piece of the puzzle in place. And so we are not in this. I don't think the analogy to 1986 really works. It's a totally different legislative effort that the Senate is looking at, and that President Obama is looking at.
Well, when we talk about the proposal, we mentioned the fact that it could provide a pathway to citizenship for 11 million undocumented workers. And our first question from our viewer says, will all illegal immigrants in the U.S. be given an opportunity to obtain citizenship?
There's a strong argument perhaps that they should. Simply because they're here. Some of them have been here for 30 years. But the short answer to that question is probably not. We are likely to put aside persons who have been engaged in criminal activity like drug selling, being part of the illegal drug market, or anybody who's had a serious felony. The Congress is likely to say, in order to get this path to citizenship, you cannot, or to legalization, you cannot have engaged in any kind of criminal activity. And if you have criminal activity, we're not going to give you this relief. We're going to deport you.
I might jump in here, and we had a conversation on the break that if you have a green card, if you're a permanent resident and you are convicted of a crime, you can be deported for that. And a very large percentage of the deportations that take place today are people who are permanent residents or are waiting to get their residency, but they are convicted of a crime, a serious crime, not a traffic ticket. Because they jeopardize their pathway to residency, at least.
That is correct.
But if you're a citizen, you're not going to be deported.
That is correct. And President Obama has made it very clear that his top priority for deportation are persons who've engaged in criminal activity. And if you look at the numbers, he's deported a lot of persons who haven't engaged in criminal activity, but he's also devoted serious, substantial enforcement efforts to get at criminal aliens. And those are record numbers of deportations. Those people are not likely to be offered a path to legalization.
It's something else that we were talking about and I found surprising, and some of our viewers might find surprising as well. There's this phrase out there, anchor babies. And we were talking about the fact that just because a baby is born here in the United States, well, that baby is a citizen of the United States. But if the parents are not, that baby's not enough to keep them here. They could still be deported, and in fact, that happens very often.
That's correct. And in fact, Congress, in I think it was 2009, asked the immigration agencies to start tracking the number of U.S. citizen children who are in a, we don't deport them because we don't deport the child, but the child may leave with the parents who we do deport. And the way our laws work right now, the simple fact that you've got a U.S. citizen child is not a reason not to deport you. It in and of itself isn't enough as a matter of law to keep you from being deported if you entered without
Child does not get out a
authorization.
deportation-free card.
That's correct. And so, I mean, there are problems because one of two things happens. A child either gets turned over to foster care, so the parents don't take the child with them. Those children, in effect, are rendered parentless, or they leave with the parent. And they grow up away from their own culture, away from their nation's history and heritage.
That costs a lot of tax dollars, too.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah. Well, John, you mentioned green card, and we have a question from a viewer who says, what is a green card? How easy or difficult is it for someone to obtain a green card?
And the funny thing is, I don't even think it's green anymore. But a green card is basically the evidence that you have been admitted for permanent residence to the United States. The way the law works, if you are in good behavior and can establish a good moral character for 5 years as a permanent resident, and you can establish fluency in English, that you know are familiar with American laws, at the end of those 5 years you can become a United States citizen. Many permanent resident aliens don't become American citizens. Up until 20 years ago, it really wasn't a big deal. My own mother, who came to this country in the early 60s, died as a permanent resident alien. She never became a U.S. citizen. Now, it makes a big difference because we have gotten so heavily behind deterring immigration. And so the criminal laws have gotten very, the number of criminal activity that can get you deported is huge.
It might be 10 years for that green card. Are you...
No, you can get that green card, and most people, well, a good chunk of people get the permanent resident card when they apply for admission to the United States. So, for example, if they're in an employment-based category, they have a skill that we want, we'll give them that visa. They come in, they're a permanent resident alien.
Right, but within, once you have the green card, you have to wait
5 years.
Not 10 years?
Nope.
Okay.
At one point in our nation's history, it was 10. That was probably, I think, the most restrictive. This was early. It was 14 years, I think, but it's been 5 years for a long time. If you're the spouse of a U.S. citizen, you can get it in 3 years. Okay. Now, that's the length of time you have to be here. We did go through a period of time where, because we had so many applicants and we had limited resources to process the applications, we were running into places where it might take you 3 to 5 years to get your citizenship once you had put through your paperwork. I think the past couple of administrations have worked hard to minimize the length of the processing delays that were causing huge numbers of people to wait long periods of time.
We are running out of time, but before we let you go, if you could tell us, what is the real difference between amnesty and citizenship? We got a question from a viewer here. Senator Vitter has said that this plan that has been proposed really is amnesty. What is the difference? Well,
citizenship is, nobody's going to get citizenship out of whatever program leaves the Senate. What they're going to have is, they're going to have an opportunity to become permanent legal residents. And then if they satisfy all of the requirements for citizenship, and pay the almost $1,000 that we charge people now to become citizens, they're going to be able to become citizens. But criminal activity automatically gets you out of that line. So nobody's getting citizenship from this proposed reform. Amnesty, I guess, to the extent that we are forgiving the fact that people came in here without entry, I guess you can think of that as amnesty. Part of the problem is that for a century, we allowed people to come across the border with no restrictions, or there was absolutely no negative thing from frequent coming in and out of the border.
We are totally out of time. So much more to talk about. Thank you very much for being here. That is all the time that we have. Be sure to join us next week as we take on the issue of gambling here in Louisiana.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for watching. We'll see you next week. Sorry.
No.